Welcome to the Millionaire Next Door podcast with Robert Curtis, CFP accredited investment fiduciary from Signature Estate and Investment Advisors. In this podcast, we help successful wealth accumulators like you looking to transition to a work optional lifestyle by helping you build strategies for growing and maintaining your wealth. Robert draws from years of experience and fiduciary responsibility and interviews guest experts to help you build reliable strategies to grow and maintain your wealth. Now, on to the show.
As we head into the final weeks of the year, it's natural to become somewhat reflective about, well, not just the past, but the future. I'm Patrice Sikora, and I'm here today to prompt Robert Curtis to talk about what has happened and what may happen for him and his practice. Robert, as we say in Jersey, how you doing, eh?
How am I doing? I'm doing great, Patrice. Thank you. So, yeah, we're hopping here for sure, but all is good. I actually just got off the phone a few minutes ago with a friend of a client who was way off track. But it was fun just connecting a few dots for him and, hearing them calm down or relax a little bit. So I love what I do.
All right. Very good to hear. I mean, I'm sure it's been a pretty busy year with the markets and everything. And now you're telling some people you can talk them off the edge. But what are some of the areas you've been focused on? What have you been thinking about?
Oh, yeah. Good question. They're having a lot of thoughts. So we're engaged in, a lot of conversations, and we're sort of those noise canceling headphones, but we're trying to put some perspectives around, this market and this economy with 8% inflation or a little bit lower, rising interest rates, probably the most telegraphed recession ever. I've never heard so many people expecting one to come. So,
Yeah.
so there's some anxious thoughts for sure. Interestingly, as I think back on my career, which is now, I've been doing this 25 years, just these different phases. I mean, there was a lot of time spent, getting and gaining technical, experience, really understanding what's going on, getting advanced credentials, things like that, CFP, accredited investment fiduciary. And I still do a lot of that. There's a lot of time devoted to that, to all the technical aspects and watching the market and everything, and just understanding, estate planning and what's called a charitable remainder trust, or different, all these technical terms, the tax code, et cetera. I still do tons of that. But within the last several years, I've really started to layer in some additional elements around practice management. And to give you an idea what I'm thinking about there, what I'm referring to, really about the client experience. Sort of what is their experience? Are they having a good experience? These conversations, our scheduling of things, all these deliverables that we have, giving them a process that they really have a good experience, one that's repeatable. I mean, it's customizable, but we've really developed a lot around that. Especially, I put a lot of emphasis on that. And interestingly, it's starting to unleash a lot of advocacy from clients, because prior to that, there were certainly introductions they'd make to folks, but a lot of times I'd hear, what do you like, or how do you describe them? Oh, I trust him. He'll take great care of me. That kind of thing. That's absolutely true, and that's very valid, and that still comes across. But as I went deeper into the process and really structured things out, I hear more introductions along the lines of, what I'll actually do, what I do for them, what they can actually go in and expect. And so that's been great. Okay, so a third element I've layered in is sort of an emphasis on marketing and branding. And what I mean by that, prior to, say, the pandemic, the lockdown, I figured we had to take a different approach to communicate our value. Prior to that, I figured just do a great job for folks. They'll get the message, they'll get the word, that'll take care of itself. But that's not always the case. I mean, I've learned a lot of times clients don't understand everything they're actually doing for us. And those folks that advocate for us, now with a little bit more emphasis on branding and marketing, when they make introductions, it's not just he's a great guy, he'll take care of me. Oftentimes they really go deep into my process. He does all these things and they explain it back really well. So someone they're introducing understands what to expect. So that's all around client experience. It's helped me contrast pretty well and stand out against a lot of competitors, which has been great. Some of the efforts I made, especially since the lockdown and the pandemic, I produced a series of short videos. There's about 15 of them on my firm's website, and those go into our process. You know, a little bit about me, my team, why I do what I do. We don't have a ton of time to get into heavy technical discussions in a 2-minute video, but those are things one can share, one can pass along if they want to introduce me. I also started the podcast about a year ago. I had listened to a lot of podcasts, sort of got through the lockdown and the pandemic when we were still coming. I'm in a small office, so I came in the entire time. But walking the dog, started to listen to some amazing podcasts. Somewhere learned, or wow, I could create a podcast. That this would be amazing. So with the podcast, and we're now 18 episodes into the podcast, I have a much better opportunity to really expound on what it is we do, go into detail on our practice and our process, all the elements of the practice, 7 pillars, 1 process. We can break it down. We started bringing a number of guests on there. We have some really great ones lined up, and I'm really excited as we launch into 2023, a lot of guests that I think are going to add a lot of value. So I realized that before anyone ever comes in and really decides they want to work with me, or maybe even sit down and interview, they want to check me out online. They can listen to these podcasts. If someone wants to introduce, they can share it with friends. I hear from clients, they're listening to the podcast, and so they really get what I'm saying on a deeper level. It's a way to connect and get additional time, and they can hear my latest updated thoughts. And sometimes they actually share those to someone who might be considering us and want to kick the proverbial tires. So that's been great. And honestly, a year ago, I never would have imagined, having gone 18 podcasts deep, it takes on sort of a life of its own. I feel like I've improved in that process quite a bit, certainly with bringing on guests and the interview process. That's a skill that takes some time. There's a statistics team that looks at my podcast and how well it's being reviewed. I went on a call with them yesterday, a full detailed Zoom. It's great. Apparently, I'm now in the top 16% of all podcasts on Apple. So
that's wonderful.
It's validating. It's nice to know
Yes.
someone's hearing it when you're putting the message out there. There's some interest. It does take on some really interesting aspects. Virtually, people are listening in every state in the nation. We're clearly the biggest in California and in Texas. So a great shout out to the folks in Texas too. We're starting to do a lot of business there, thank goodness. And but literally on other continents, every continent, in other countries, in all kinds of states, in major metropolitan areas, some of which I honestly don't know a soul. Maybe Minneapolis, St. Paul. I don't know that I know anyone.
Not yet. Who knows?
But at any rate, if you're listening, so we appreciate it. That's been great for just communicating my value. I think clients are able to hear it at a deeper level. People understand all the things we're facing. So that's been really nice. So just kind of summing it up, our clients receive steady correspondence. Some of it is technical and time sensitive. Other items are just related to service and communication.
So tell me about the type of engagements you've been having with clients.
Well, interesting. There's folks that fully empower me, I would say, and that really opens up the ability for me and my team to serve them really well. There's other folks that never even occurred to them. They want to engage me for a certain small aspect, or sometimes I see people who, quote, diversify their advisors. Maybe they have 2 or 3 advisors, It makes sense to them, but from a holistic sense, I don't see that it does make a lot of sense because they're 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 not able to be as well when they consolidate. We can be much better on the pricing, give them much better pricing. We're able to see everything holistically as opposed to having three people that don't even interact. It just doesn't make us much sense. It's sort of like having three dentists or something. So I really think people would prefer to have one super solid, very deep connected relationship. Maybe they just haven't found the trust or understand that yet. But a lot of folks engage me fully. And when they do that, when they empower me fully, they really think of me as someone who liberates them to go live their life.
Tell me more about that. For
Yeah.
instance, like where do you see that show up really?
Yeah, well, interestingly, one area it shows up, and this is an area that certainly over the last year I've always dealt with this, but it's come into being a lot more. This would be, say, working with aging clients, and a lot of times they engage their adult children in this process. So these are folks maybe in their 50s or 60s, and so they engage their adult children to sort of help better manage their ongoing dynamic
Mhm.
situations. So this could be maybe the parent is slowing down a little bit. They're still with it. Sometimes there's a diagnosis. Sometimes they're going through some treatment or just slowing down. Maybe they want the help of their adult daughter to help them write checks, get them to medical appointments. But they're becoming a little bit more dependent or looking out for help from their adult children here. And and then sometimes they even these adult children are spotting some issues where mom or dad's just not quite as with it. Sometimes they're really with it. Sometimes there's some early signs of diminished capacity. By the time those show up, it's usually a little bit more advanced than you might think and probably headed down that road further. But a lot of times we'll have these folks become powers of attorney. If there's a trusted relationship, they can help them along the way, and then they involve me in that process. And so it's additional dialogue to really, because one of the things that's really interesting is several years back I actually went through this on my own. I mean,
Oh,
I was a younger person for sure. I actually helped care for my grandmother who made it to 102, but she was predeceased by my mom, who really should have played that role, and that was pretty traumatic for her. But I stepped into that role. I had to deal with it with my dad too. So the point I'm driving at, I mean, it was stressful. There's all this. You're kind of making these decisions for someone else's life. It's a new experience. You don't even always know if you're doing it the right way. It's a little daunting. He had just gotten married. I was starting a career. I mean, then we were raising children. There was a
and you're
lot of other
basically
things.
you're jumping a generation too. As you say, your mother
Yeah,
would have normally
yeah,
stepped into this.
yeah. So I've actually dealt with it a couple of times. And so interestingly, that was an experience that's already occurred. But now when I step into that role and help these folks, there's definitely a comfort level
Mhm.
having really sat in their shoes, sort of, or understand what they're going through, and then had some time to process that whole thing. I just think it adds a lot of value. So I'm very sensitive, and nothing against someone giving advice, but if they haven't actually been there and gone through that, I just think it's more difficult to relate. So I just treat that very specially, and I'm very kind, but I need to give professional advice and tell them what's practical, and just give them tips, stuff on, take some time for yourself, get some respite care, mom or dad has enough money to afford some of these services, that because sometimes it can get very, very daunting, these demands, or the call at 3 a.m., or I can't find the remote control, or my car keys, and you're like, dad, you don't drive anymore, but any rate, these types of folks, they really fully engage me. And then I often develop a relationship with their, adult children. Sometimes I'll work with them for an entire decade. So we have a lot of time to really get close and comfortable. But they fully empower me. And a lot of times they introduce me to other folks too, or their other family members. they start advocating for me. That's been good. So, I had one of these folks just describe that the thing they really liked about our relationship was the consistency of communication. Everything is scheduled and process driven and nothing falls through the cracks. So that's how it's showing up, Patrice.
You talk about process a lot, but tell me about some of the other areas too.
Some of the other areas. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Process is key. I mean, it's really, really a lot about process. There's just no question. One of the things about the process, and I talked in quite a bit of depth in the last podcast we had with Mike Sy, with one of my coaches, is I'm always working on improving the process. I mean, it's a pretty evolved, thought out process, but I have got ambitious goals. I'm not satisfied with the status quo. We're always looking to make it better from a client experience, technical knowledge, even some branding and marketing that might get out to people to understand what we actually do or how we might be able to help them. So if my long-term goal is 10% improvement, which at this point is absolutely huge, I might think about doing this 1% at a time over 10 different times. That's much more manageable and likely to occur. So that's a process I'm forever looking at. I mean, the best are forever improving, but rarely swinging for the fences. There's a consultant I followed for years named Jim Rohn. He said, work harder on yourself than you do on anything else. And that really sort of typifies how I view things or how I am. I mean, frankly, most limitations are self-imposed, I think on most people. So we're always trying to improve. Nothing improves, because it's being neglected. So, what you strive to achieve professionally, it must be bookended by what you achieve personally. So it's really all about showing up and being present, making sure I put in the work ahead of time to be ready for the moment, big or small. And I've had a deeper sort of attention put on what I call moments of truth with clients. Moments of truth would be sort of key life events that come up in various forms all over the place. It could be a diagnosis, of they have something that comes up a lot. Could be birth of a child, a graduation. It could be loss of a spouse. I'm talking about some key life events that are really meaningful. So we honor that. We get right into it, but I'm very attentive to that. So another quote I just love, but I really try and live by and embody: how you do anything is how you do everything.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. There have been lots of changes in the last 2 years. I mean, we've been through, we haven't been through COVID. We're not finished with COVID. Hopefully we've been through the worst of it. We had a lockdown. Talk to me about the time since then.
Yeah, well, running a business and a team, we're constantly working on refining and optimizing everything we do. After a while of these continuous improvements, and as I keep saying, they're still ongoing. I really love that aspect of my work. But the business starts to run more like a Swiss watch. And it's not at the mercy of just me or some perceived maverick talent. It's about a consistent process. So oftentimes I don't even have to be present. Surprise, surprise. And I'm not trying to make myself obsolete here, because I really like what I do and I'll be involved in it for a long time. But as a business owner, maybe I should be striving to do that a little bit more, or maybe other business owners should be striving. So what I mean, let me give you an example of that. There's a lot of times I see clients call in and they want to go straight to my assistant or another team member. She knows how to move the money. I just want to talk to her, and that's great. I don't have to step in that process. A couple of months back, I remember seeing my assistant interacting with one of my top clients, and they were having a really nice engagement, and she had actually very kindly brought her in a bouquet of flowers and all this. And I'm thinking, really thanking her for all the great work she'd done. But was going to go out and say hi, and I did say hi, but it was almost like they had this personal time, and I was like,
Don't need
maybe
you.
I'll just
Don't need you.
don't, yeah, and that's okay. That's 100% okay. So I mean, it really went to testament to the strength of the relationship. But we're also trying to educate clients too on who on the team plays what role. And if you have this doctor, you don't always need to speak to the doctor, right? Sometimes you just want to schedule something or get your prescription renewed or that kind of thing, or have a general inquiry. So, I've enjoyed doing that and being able to step back a little bit and quote stay in my lane for
But that also gives you a little mental health space too.
it gives some mental health space, and I'm a absolutely huge believer in you have to have some mental health space. You have to have some clarity. You can't be caught up in every moment responding to every email, every text, all of this, every market change, every half hour, every news report. That's what I call tuning out the noise, so we can focus on the big picture, really get into the details.
All right. You got any other post-COVID thoughts you want to share?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot. I mean, we're at the point here, we're it's literally just before Thanksgiving here. So this will probably not even release till sometime in December. But just some thoughts as we kind of wrap out the year. It's been estimated that 100 billion people have lived on planet Earth, and close to 8 billion are alive today. There's a good chance that over 90% of them would do anything, for my worst day. And I'm thinking a lot of listeners probably feel the same. I mean, even when we don't have great days, there's probably a lot of people have a lot worse. So, be at peace as you go forward. Know that you're worthy of self-actualization, and do everything you can to share your wisdom and good fortune. I mean, that's an approach I take. If you pay 2 hours on a parking meter, but you end up only needing 40 minutes of it, you're not obligated to stay. Let someone else have that,
Have that
hour and
time.
20 minutes, maybe pay it forward a little bit. I mean, the essence of Zen, and I hate to sound all woo and all that kind of thing, but frankly, we could live to be 100, or it could all be over tomorrow.
Mhm.
So, don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds you plant. That's so important. I mean, when you're raising children in life, but I also think of having done this 25 years, the Millionaire Next Door, there were a lot of seeds that are planted that are really starting to blossom now and taking off. And there's still ones we're planting right now that'll impact clients later in life or future generations, sometimes second or third generations. So, it's great. So, C.S. Lewis had a quote I love. He said, "You don't have a soul, you are a soul." So those are some of the thoughts that are resonating with me at the moment.
From the author of the Narnia Chronicles, I should say. Yeah.
Very good.
Well, as we, who hasn't read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to their grandkids?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. We are, it's holiday season now, whether this is airing in December or people are listening to it in January, it's still the holidays. And actually, throughout the year, you still think of the holidays. So tell me what you do for the holidays. What do you do for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, that's great. Well, Thanksgiving's always been my favorite holiday. I love to eat, but I like the downtime, the family, the fact that anyone could give thanks. Anyone should give thanks. But what do we do? Traditionally, we've gone up to Sequoia National Park with some other families. There's sort of a family place, lodge up there. We're not doing that this year. There's some great hiking. We're actually just going with just our family. We're going up to Northern California. My son is a student at the University of California in Santa Cruz. So we've kind of adopted that area a little bit to learn about it while he's there 4 years. And it's a really nice community. So we've rented a house. There's a view of the ocean. We're just going to hang out, cook food, take it easy. But there's some hiking, probably involves some kayaking. We're going to kind of live vicariously, let my son show us some of the things he's experiencing. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And then another thing just to mention, I'm in the Tournament of Roses, which puts on the Pasadena Tournament of Roses, the Rose Parade and the game. So it sounds like you're familiar with this. It's been around for years, and so it's watched by, I don't know, hundreds of millions of people all over
Millions
the
of people.
world.
Yes.
Yeah, in like 185 countries, something like that. So I live here in Pasadena, California. The weather's usually beautiful. We're the people who put this on, the parade and the game. And on January 1st, this year it's actually going to be on January 2nd, because the tournament has this long-standing agreement. They will never hold it on a Sunday. They like to say, yeah, yeah. Internally, the joke is that they have a deal with God. If we won't hold it on Sunday if you just make the weather nice and beautiful or not rainy. And most years that's worked out pretty well. My first year was the most epic rain ever, and it was really rough. But we usually have really gorgeous weather, and so these floats come down what's called Colorado Boulevard. They have all these natural substances, not just flowers, but all kinds of stuff. My job on the committee this year is inspecting the floats. We do several float tests for the mechanics and things like that, making sure the fire extinguishers are in the right place. Other areas to make sure they're safe long before they're all decorated and the flowers are put on. But it's just a really great experience. I mean, you see this parade, and there's a stealth flyover typically every year, which is just absolutely amazing, because you see this Batman looking plane, you probably designed by Tony Stark or whatever, but it's really no sound to it, but it comes down. And I think it costs about $1 billion for each of these things, but it's a really cool way to start off the new year. And you go through these different committees. You're on for 2 years on one committee. You're supposed to learn the first year and sort of teach the second year. Then you move to another committee. So there's so many aspects to putting on this parade. Everybody's a volunteer. It's about 925 volunteers. So needless to say, the end of the year is actually crunch time for us. That's when we're really busy putting on the parade. So that's a tradition. I'll be doing that. And then I've also scheduled a couple things sort of as carrots for myself, just letting folks know I like to have some rejuvenation. Last year, I went on a surf retreat in January for about 4 days. It was great. I rebooked for this year. I met some great folks. I learned some good techniques. I learned some good stuff. And then I've also scheduled one more thing next year. I'm excited. Just in the process of learning, I guess I never just, even at the Mexico, it's not like I'm kicking back on a beach. I'm always working on something. So there is a retreat going on in March in Austin, Texas. I'm going to travel to. There's a group of doctors, pretty high-level doctors that I followed their community, and they actually work with a lot of professional athletes, a lot of NFL players, NBA players, all kinds of folks. They're having a retreat. They're talking about all kinds of health matters, but also some spiritual matters. They're bringing in lots of kind of world-class speakers, and just their community is really interesting. And I've engaged with them, and they sponsor a minor league baseball team out of the Southeast. I think it's near in Lexington, Kentucky or something. I'm not sure where it is exactly. They've actually shifted the emphasis for next year. They're not going to sponsor minor league baseball. They're sponsoring a professional pickleball team, if you can believe this. And apparently it's the fastest growing sport in the country. I'm a tennis player, and there's actually a high level of professional athletes that do it. So they're super into it. But those are just a few of the things I have looking forward. And again, just kind of continuing to improve the process all the time. Those are my thoughts as we close out the year.
Well, Robert, we're going to continue this conversation in the next episode of this podcast. But right now we're kind of running up against the clock. So how can people talk to you and reach you and share their thoughts with you?
Sure. Best way is just find me online. You can Google me, Robert Curtis, CFP. You should find a link, connection to my LinkedIn page, me on my firm's website, the videos, past podcasts. You're welcome to email me as well, rcurtis, RCURTISS @SEIA.com. That should be in the show notes as well. Mm-hmm. You're welcome to call the office too. And by the way, if anybody's really interested you're welcome to book some time if you want to engage, if you have some questions. We'll figure out if there's a fit. I'll be welcome to give you like a 30-minute complimentary call that we can fit at a mutually convenient time. And those are the ways to reach me.
Fantastic. And listeners, follow this podcast for the newest episodes, and of course, share with others you care about.
Thank you for listening to the Millionaire Next Door podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Signature Estate and Investment Advisors or Royal Alliance Associates Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.